start with this. Well, this past weekend, the WBC's bantamweight champion, Barbie Juarez, defended her WBC title for what is the 9th time against the Argentinian slugger, Carolina Duer. And, you know, Barbie Juarez really is an iconic fighter. I mean, for the Mexican fight fans in the sport of women's boxing.
She's an icon.
Barbie Juarez possesses an iconic quality that very few fighters actually possess. Very accomplished. Been in there with many good fighters. And she's coming off of consecutive victories, consecutive title defenses.
Of the WBC title.
She hasn't lost a fight since 2016 when she squared off against Argentina's own Daniela Bermudez. And since then, she's racked up 11, count them, 11 professional victories in a row. 9 of those victories being title defenses of what is the WBC bantamweight title. So not only is this already an accomplished fighter, an experienced boxer, but this is a fighter who's very much keeping busy. I mean, 11 fights in the course of, 3 years?
Wow.
Yeah, Barbie's not lost a step at all. She hasn't lost a step. But the thing is, after having this many professional victories and this many title defenses consecutively, given that Barbie Juarez
ain't getting any younger,
is 39 years old, she's not getting any younger. You wonder if she's ever going to be in a unification match anytime in the near future. You wonder if she wants to avenge the loss to Daniela Bermudez. Daniela Bermudez, who just so happens to be the WBO champion in the bantamweight division and is ranked on the Ring IQ pound-for-pound list, most credible pound-for-pound lists in regards to the sport of women's boxing. Daniela Bermudez and her, they've got history. I feel like they have unfinished business. I feel like Barbie has a score to settle with Daniela, and I'm wondering if any effort is going to be put forth in squaring off against Daniela one more time to avenge the loss. Because for a 39-year-old fighter like Barbie, who's plenty accomplished, you know, she could retire right now and she'd have a great professional track record. But if she is to continue in the sport of boxing, I think the only kinds of fights, the only kinds of opponents that make any sense for Barbie are the other world champions, the other titleists. That, okay, you know, you're nearing the end, or you should be. You're nearing the end. And if you really want to leave something for your legacy, you know, you decide to unify. You decide to unify with Daniela Bermudez. You decide to fight her one more time for the WBC and WBO titles. If not her, you decide to fight Mayerling Rivas for what is the WBA title. Or Maria Roman for the IBF title. Essentially what I'm getting at, without beating around the bush, is that I think it's about time that Barbie looked to these other champions for some big situations, for some big fights. I mean, if she were to come up short, not saying that she would, but if she were to come up short in any of those fights, I don't really think anyone would hold it against her, not at 39 years old. You know, that even if she lost one of those fights, she could retire on that with nothing to be ashamed of because she's already so accomplished. Thus, those are the fights that make sense. The fights with the other world champions, the fights with the other titleists, particularly Daniela Bermudez, who I feel Barbie has unfinished business with. I think those are the only fights at this point in the juncture that make any kind of sense. You can go on defending your title against the likes of a Bonita Fernandez or the likes of a Carolina Duer, and those are solid fighters. They're solid fighters. Nothing against them, but they don't really pose the same challenges as a Daniela Bermudez, do they? I mean,
they don't.
It's pretty obvious.
They don't.
I mean, look, I don't want to sound like a broken record here. I know I say it all the time, but I reiterate. In light of this successful title defense, that's really what resonates with me the most, that the only fights at this point in the juncture that make sense for Barbie are unification fights. There is a Jackie Nava fight to consider. Jackie Nava, who is the interim champion to the WBA title. Presumably, she will be challenging the full champion, Mayerling Rivas, at some point. That is, unless Mayerling so decides to vacate the title, and then Jackie would be elevated to full champion. But then, a fight between Jackie and a fight between Barbie would make a lot of sense. That would be a fight between two Mexican icons in the sport of women's boxing, and that would be a unification fight if it happened that way. But I reiterate, the only fights I think that make sense for Barbie are unification fights, because I think that anything short of that would not conjure up the same kind of enthusiasm, the same kind of excitement when there's that much on the line, and when the girl opposite the ring of Barbie is another world champion. You know, I think that's what needs to happen. So, you know, I'm just hoping that this is something that gets ironed out in the near future.
But you know, we're doing what we're doing, and we're starting to bring this weight back under control. You know?
When do you expect to be back in the ring, or when do you target to be back in the ring?
I'm hoping late November, early December is our idea. I don't know when exactly, but I'm working on it.
There you have it, folks. We could see Darrell Miller back in action as soon as the end of November or early December, late 2019. And it goes back to what I told you before. It was never a question of whether or not Darrell Miller was going to come back. He was always going to come back, like it or not. And his polarizing personality, the controversy ahead of what was supposed to be the Joshua fight, I hate to say it, but it is the truth that kind of situation, that kind of controversy, it lends itself to the overall exposure of the fighter because it creates a fighter that you either love or love to hate. It all depends on who you ask. And that kind of a situation gets attention for the division and what fights are within it. I mean, you put it together. You hypothesize the different names that are out there that you can mix and match in a situation with Darrell Miller. And you tell me that those fights wouldn't be big fights. I mean, just imagine Darrell Miller versus Derek Chisora. Darrell Miller versus Dillian White. Darrell Miller versus Joseph Parker. Darrell Miller versus an Otto Valine.
It's names.
Darrell Miller versus Usyk. Darrell Miller versus Hergovic. Mix and match the names. Darrell Miller versus Tony Yoka. There are any variety of fighters out there looking to make a name for themselves, climbing up the ranks, seasoned veterans, former champions, the kind of guys that have been around the block, and you can mix and match Darrell Miller's name with any one of those fighters, and you end up with a decent-sized situation. And the controversy ahead of what was supposed to be the Joshua fight between him and Darrell Miller,
It helps.
that is as a result of that controversy, because now what people want to see is Darrell Miller, upon his return, is he going to be the same guy that he was before, now that he got caught red-handed? He was on all those different performance-enhancing drugs. Are we going to see the Darrell Miller of old? Or are we going to see a less than adequate Darrell Miller, now that he's been caught? This kind of a question looms over Darrell Miller and what he is to do next, and this kind of a question is going to get people to tune in. It's going to get people to watch his fights to see what happens next and where he goes from there. And I'll tell you something, everybody's gotten really accustomed to the same old names in the heavyweight division. Your Tyson Fury, your Deontay Wilder, your Anthony Joshua, and your Andy Ruiz to a lesser extent. That whenever the division is brought up, these are more than likely the names that are being discussed. But I'll tell you something, the division itself is fast filling up with so much talent, so many killers, that they can't stay away from each other. You still got Joe Joyce floating around. You got Daniel Dubois floating around. You got Hergovic floating around. Otto Valine in a career best performance that he just put on against Tyson Fury.
Murat Gassiev.
Michael Hunter, Alexander Usyk, Agit Kabayel, Kubrat Pulev. For Christ's sake, Povetkin's still floating around.
And Manuel Charles.
Chisora, White, Parker. It creates a situation to where the division is fast filling up with killers and the division is stacked. Thus, these guys can't get around each other forever. For a guy like Darrell Miller, who still has his O intact, but doesn't yet have that big signature fight to build upon, he's gonna have to fight one of these fucking guys. There's no two ways around it. There's no two ways about it, okay? You didn't hurt your own momentum with the controversy ahead of the Joshua fight, what was supposed to be the Joshua fight. But if there is a silver lining there, it's that people are gonna be paying attention from here on out as to what happens next, and he can use that as a golden opportunity to redeem himself by fighting one of those fighters. I don't care if it's Joseph Parker or Joe Joyce. He's got to fight somebody. A Junior Fa, a fucking F.A. Ajagba. There's any variety of talented fighters in the heavyweight division that Darrell Miller can square off against and get that signature fight, get that redemption, so that he's back in the mix of all the conversations. You can't look to a Joshua right now. You can't look to an Andy Ruiz right now. You can't look to a Wilder right now. All these guys are spoken for. You can't look to a Tyson Fury right now. All these guys are spoken for. And they don't see an incentive to fight the likes of a Darrell Miller. Thus, he must look elsewhere to have that signature fight. And any one of the aforementioned names would be a suitable candidate for what could be Darrell Miller's signature fight. He certainly has the mouth for it. He's got the gift of gab. He knows how to sell a fight. But he's got to have it in the ring, have that signature fight, that signature victory, because for all intents and purposes, Darrell Miller still is an undefeated fighter. So he still has that to build upon. Many interesting comments from Darrell Miller in this interview, in this video, as to when we can expect to see him next, among other things.
Would you fight in Saudi? It's kind of a...
Listen, I heard Adrian's getting $75 million just to go over there.
Jeez.
So,
yeah, I'd go.
You know what I mean? So, you hear that?
Yeah.
And he got his ass whooped and making $75 million.
Yeah.
Listen, when I beat their ass, I'm going right to Saudi too.
Yeah, get that check, right?
That's what the rumor mill's spinning, folks. That Anthony Joshua, in spite of not being a unified champion anymore, Nope. in spite of coming off a loss, this guy stands to make more money than any other champion, any other guy in the weight class combined. Okay? You know Tyson Fury's doing a WWE thing, and he stands to make a good amount of money for participating in that crowned emerald whatever thing. I mean, he does stand to make a couple of dollars in that thing. I heard something to the tune of $12 million. So that's a good payday, all things considered, without actually having to be in a boxing match. That's a pretty goddamn good payday. But all things considered, even what he stands to get paid is dwarfed by what Anthony Joshua stands to make, further driving the point home that whether you motherfuckers want to accept it or not, the cash cow in this division is still Anthony Joshua. He's the money man. And Wilder, Fury, and just about every other heavyweight in the division better hope that Joshua wins that Ruiz rematch. Because if he falters, well, there goes your big money fight. No other fight in the division, with no other fighter more so than him, offers up that kind of a payday to where $7-8 million, it's a drop in the bucket.
It's nothing.
You know, no other fight.
It's nothing.
This is the kind of situation that invigorates the weight class and the fighters within it, because they have that to aspire to and work towards. That you got a guy, he's got all this marquee value, he generates all this money, and it creates the situations to where those kinds of fighters want those kinds of fights. Believe it or not, whether you want to accept it or not, a guy like that being in a weight class is very good for the weight and very good for the sport of boxing, because he's generating all this money that's going into the sport. I mean, you don't see Saudi Arabian investors telling Wilder, hey, come over here to Saudi Arabia and fight Ortiz again. You don't fucking see that, right?
Right.
But when it was Joshua, that's what they did. Why? Because he's the fucking money man, whether you want to accept it or not. I mean, y'all see what Showtime did with Wilder's fight. Y'all see when it came to Wilder versus Ortiz 2 and what that fight would have costed them to stage. They felt it didn't even make financial sense. These guys have been in the Deontay Wilder business for as long as I can remember. And yet at the prospect of having to pay this guy what he thinks he deserves, even though he doesn't actually generate it, better still, at the prospect of flipping the bill for that fight, they said, you know what, Fox?
Fuck that.
You can have it. You pay for lunch this time, because we're just about done here, you know?
Fuck that.
Guy like Wilder, his fans don't want to accept it, but the proof is in the pudding. This guy is nowhere near on the level of Anthony Joshua's marquee value. In fact, no one is. Not even Tyson Fury, who, you know, right now he actually is doing better for himself than Wilder is. I mean, you got the money that you're making from ESPN. There's that. But now you got the WWE money coming in. There's also that. And I heard he's recording a Christmas album.
See Mariah Carey?
With Robbie Williams. So I'm sure he's going to see some kind of something from that as well. Tyson Fury, all things considered, is doing very well for himself. More so than Wilder. More so. And even he is nowhere near the level of Joshua's marquee value. He is just not. You know, Wilder's almost a tragedy. He's almost an American tragedy. I mean, he is. You got Tyson Fury, he comes over here. They decide to boost this guy's profile, get him some exposure by having him participate in a WWE event. And you wonder, why wasn't this done for Wilder? I mean, I've asked this before, but it really does resonate with me that for a homegrown American fighter who's been right here in America the whole time, pro boxer since what, 2008, 2009, something like that? The whole time that, you know, he's got all these people around him. You got Shelly Finkel, you got Stefan Espinoza, you got JD's, you got Al Heyman, you got Lou DiBella, where you had him. You know, you got all these people, and nobody thought to put Wilder on the WWE like some American fighters have been in the past. You know, Mike Tyson, he made an appearance there. Floyd Mayweather, he made an appearance there. And nobody thought, hey, let's put Wilder in a Royal Rumble, something along those lines, to boost this guy's profile, because his fights in and of themselves, they're not really doing it. So we got to do something to boost this guy's profile. I mean, this is something that could have happened a long time ago, and yet Tyson Fury beat him to the punch. He actually got access to that demographic of fans. Those millions upon millions of people who, you know what, you can think whatever the fuck you want to think about the WWE. They got a paying public. They have a lot of customers. And now Tyson Fury is going to be exposed to all those customers, where by rights, it really should have been Wilder. What's the fucking point in having, you know, a financial advisor, a manager, an acting promoter, a network executive? What's the point in having all these fingers in the pie when they can't orchestrate those kinds of situations for you? I just don't get it. The guy's an American tragedy. And with this rumor in regards to Anthony Joshua's next payday, whether you're looking at it from, you know, what Darrell Miller said or what Dave Meltzer said, because the reports are floating around that he stands to make $75 million for this fight with no belts. No belts. In a fight that's not even going to be an American pay-per-view. Yet he's still making more than every American fighter. In fact, he's making more than any fighter at the weight. When you think about all this, all it does is drive the point home that Wilder was in fact pricing himself out, asking for 50%. He was in fact being a bit ridiculous, turning down that $100 million. And he may have costed himself an opportunity that, you know what, I hate to say it, it might not come back. Not if Joshua doesn't win that Ruiz rematch. Who else is going to get you $100 million? Or 80 million, 20 million for Brazil, 80 for Joshua. But who else is going to get you that kind of a payday? Who else?
Nobody, baby.
Guy's an idiot, man. He's an idiot.
And finally, Eddie Hearn had this to say. He says Bivol going over to ESPN to fight the winner of Vosdik versus Beterbiev isn't a problem at all. He also mentioned how the very next time we see Bivol in action, it could be somewhere in South Korea, as Bivol is linked to 3 different promoters, one being Matchroom, Eddie Hearn, the second being Main Events, Kathy Duva, and apparently there's a third, and they might want to explore the possibility of Bivol doing something in South Korea, it being that while Bivol is a Russian national, he is of Korean descent. So, that, I guess they feel he's got some kind of marquee value there, some potential appeal they want to capitalize on. And in all honesty, so long as the wheels are in motion for Bivol to unify with the winner of Vosdik versus Beterbiev, I don't even mind if he squeezes in a fight in between that time. That, if he wants to do something over there, he wants to get some exposure, raise his marquee value, why not? Because in all honesty, whoever wins the fight this weekend between Vosdik and Beterbiev, they're not likely to go right into a unification fight thereafter. They may need a tune-up fight. They may need a little gimme fight after what could be a very difficult fight, a very difficult situation. Thus, the unification process, it's not exactly being stifled if Bivol goes to South Korea, beats some guy up over there to get some fans. I'm not against it. I'm not opposed to it, so long as the wheels are in motion, because the biggest hurdle that Bivol versus one of those fighters faced is that they fight on different platforms. Both Vosdik and Beterbiev, they fight on ESPN, and Bivol fights on DAZN. And I figured, Eddie Hearn is going to let the guy cross the street if that's what he's got to do, because nobody wins if you isolate the fighter. Nobody wins if you isolate him and deprive him of the opportunities to really show his shit and show that he's the best guy at the weight. He needs that kind of a chance, and if he's got to cross the street to get it, then so be it, because in all honesty, I feel like Matchroom has exhausted their resources in trying to keep Bivol busy. They just don't have anyone else for him to fight. And with those things in mind, letting him cross the street at least once is the only decision that makes sense. If this guy is to have a future, if he is to establish himself as the best in show, this is the only move that's good for business. So I applaud Eddie Hearn's openness, his willingness to let Bivol cross into hostile territory and potentially bring back some belts.